Welcome to the deep dive. Let's jump right in.
Okay.
If you've spent any time around university life, maybe studied there, taught there, or just, wondered what goes on, it's a whole world, isn't it?
It really is. And what's happening now in teaching and learning is, well, it's fascinating. How students learn, how universities are trying to adapt.
Especially with the a world changing so fast.
Exactly. It feels vastly different from even, say, 20 years ago. The pressures, the students themselves, even how we think about teaching, it's all evolved.
And that's our mission today, really. We've got this great source, a big handbook all about teaching and learning in UK higher education.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. Kind of the insider's guide for academics, whether they're new or experienced.
And importantly, it mentions it's not just for university lecturers, right?
No, that's a key point.
Yeah.
It's also aimed at people teaching university-level stuff in other settings, like clinicians teaching medical students or engineers on placement, and also people coming into UK academia from other countries or careers.
Right. So our goal is to guide you through it. We'll try and, pull out the most important bits, the interesting facts, the practical stuff. What makes university teaching work now?
Kind of a shortcut to understanding the academic side of things.
Exactly. The engine room, so to speak.
Okay, so where do we start? To understand the teaching, you kind of need the bigger picture first, the context.
Right. Universities aren't islands. There are these external forces shaping things.
Definitely. You've got national bodies, haven't you? Like UCAS handling applications.
And the Quality Assurance Agency, the QAA, they seem quite important for teaching standards.
Yeah, they use this thing called a quality code, and they have these subject benchmark statements, basically setting expectations for what graduates should know and be able to do in a particular subject.
Although the handbook does say how the QAA actually checks things, varies across the UK. It's not uniform.
That's true. The approach differs in Scotland, Wales, England, Northern Ireland. So there's the framework, but the implementation isn't identical.
Hmm.
And of course, government policy is always a big factor too.
And maybe the biggest external shift mentioned is internationalization.
Oh, huge. But not just students coming to the UK. The handbook really highlights transnational education, TNE.
TNE, that's UK universities teaching students overseas.
Exactly. Delivering degrees abroad, maybe through branch campuses or partner institutions.
And here's a fact that, well, it surprised me a bit. The UK teaches more students via TNE than international students who physically come here.
Yeah, the figures cited for 2011-12 were something like 575,000 TNE students compared to 435,000 international students in the UK. It's a massive operation.
Wow, that's a lot of students studying for UK degrees without ever setting foot here.
And it fosters collaborations, research links, all sorts. But there's another big global trend in the handbook notes. The rise of universities elsewhere, especially East Asia.
Precisely. The growth has been dramatic. Looking at global rankings, China's representation just exploded between the mid-2000s and early 2010s.
Went from 8 in the top 200 in 2005 to 28 by 2013. Something like that, yeah. And other places too, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan. They're all climbing fast. The prediction is they'll be challenging the traditional players even more seriously soon.
So you've got UK universities influenced by national standards, operating globally through TNE, and facing more competition worldwide. That's the backdrop.
That's the context. And within that, the handbook then drills down into the students themselves because, they're not passive recipients. Their behavior, their feedback, it all shapes the learning.
And the students themselves are so much more diverse now, which is great, but challenging for teaching.
Absolutely. You just can't assume everyone comes with the same background, knowledge, or learning style. People arrive with wildly different experiences, expectations, ways of studying.
So teachers really need to acknowledge that variety.
They have to, and use diverse teaching methods to match. The handbook really stresses this.
What about international students specifically? Those new to the whole UK system?
Yeah, the handbook flags potential challenges. Things like understanding academic expectations, maybe language issues. It stresses needing really good support, both pastoral and academic. Clear communication is vital.
And it suggests universities sometimes underestimate what's needed to provide that support well.
It does hint at that, yeah, the scale and cost. And it makes another strong point that learning to support students from different cultures is now like a core skill for academics.
Not just a nice to have.
No. And it links it directly to funding, pointing out that a significant chunk of university jobs rely on international student fees. So being good at intercultural teaching isn't just pedagogy, it's Well, it's essential for the institution's health.
That really connects the teaching to the wider university business. The handbook also talks about life load factors. What are those?
Yeah, that's a useful term, life load factors.
Yeah.
Basically, all the other stuff students are juggling outside of their studies.
Like working part-time, money worries?
Exactly. Family commitments, health stuff, commuting. All of these pressures can seriously affect how much time and energy a student can actually give to their course, no matter how good the teaching is.
It's acknowledging the whole person, not just the student part.
Right. Which links to student engagement. It's not just about showing up, it's about the whole environment.
And the handbook says engagement starts even before they enroll.
Yeah, with how the learning environment is designed, and importantly, the attitudes of the lecturers. Creating that welcoming, supportive feel right from the start is key.
Okay, that makes sense. Building that relationship early. So we've got the context, the diverse students, their external pressures. Now, how do they actually learn? The handbook suggests moving past a deficit lens.
Yeah, this is important. Not just seeing students as empty buckets filling up the deficit idea. Instead, it's about engaging with what they already know or think, even if it's different, and then challenging or developing that understanding.
Building on what's there.
Exactly. And the handbook mentions that classic research on approaches to learning, deep versus surface.
Right, memorizing facts versus really understanding.
Kind of. Surface is often about just passing the assessment, rote learning. Deep is about seeking meaning, connecting ideas. But the key thing is, a student's approach isn't fixed. It's often a response to how they're being taught and assessed.
So if the exam only tests recall, students will focus on recall.
Pretty much. The context shapes the strategy, which leads to other ways of thinking about learning, like academic literacies.
Okay, academic literacies sounds a bit theoretical.
Well, think of it like this. Every subject has its own language, its own way of arguing, its own way of writing. History is different from physics, which is different from business.
Right.
So academic literacies is about learning how to think, talk, and write like a historian or a physicist. It's about becoming part of that subject's community of practice. Learning the rules of the club, basically.
Like learning the specific discourse of a discipline.
Exactly. And the handbook does caution that sometimes these community practices can unintentionally exclude people who don't pick up the unspoken rules quickly.
That's a fair point. Something for teachers to be mindful of. Another concept mentioned is threshold concepts.
Oh yeah, these are fascinating. They're described as these core ideas in a subject that are, well, troublesome but transformative. Once you grasp one, it changes how you see the whole subject. You can't really unsee it.
Like a gateway you have to pass through.
Precisely. Until you get it, lots of other things don't quite make sense. Maybe like understanding relativity in physics or opportunity cost in economics.
So the argument is teaching should focus less on just covering loads of content.
And more on helping students really grapple with these tricky, crucial threshold concepts, depth over breadth at these key points.
Okay, so how do teachers actually do this? What about teaching methods? Lectures, for instance, still relevant.
The handbook suggests yes, but they need to be engaging, not just talking at students for an hour. So clear structure, varying the pace.
Maybe building in activities.
Yeah, exactly. Using clickers for quick questions, maybe a think, pair, share activity, posing problems, anything to get students actively thinking during the lecture. And providing materials beforehand in different formats helps too.
What about small group teaching? Seminars, tutorials?
Optimal size is often suggested as around 5 to 8. Big enough for discussion, small enough that people can't easily hide. The teacher's role there is much more about facilitating, guiding, asking questions.
And dealing with a classic group work problem, someone not pulling their weight.
The freeloader issue, yeah. The advice is things like setting clear expectations up front, maybe having ground rules agreed by the group, and sometimes assessing the process, individual contributions, not just the final product.
Makes sense. And then there's online and blended learning. Obviously huge now.
Absolutely. And the key message seems to be, good online learning isn't just dumping materials online. It needs careful design. And the teacher needs to be actively present in that online space through discussion forums, feedback, structuring activities, making it feel like a real learning environment, not just a repository. The power, the handbook notes, is flexibility escaping the limits of time and place. It allows for different kinds of assessment, group work across distances.
There was a lot of buzz about MOOC's massive open online courses a while back.
Yeah, perhaps a bit of hype. The handbook suggests the focus is shifting back to what makes any teaching good, whether it's online or face-to-face. It's about the pedagogical design, the interaction, the support. The medium is secondary to the principles.
So regardless of the setting, lecture hall, seminar room, online forum, the core ideas are engaging diverse students, understanding their external pressures, focusing on deep understanding.
That seems to be the thread, which leads us neatly into assessment and feedback. Absolutely crucial.
An assessment isn't just about testing knowledge, is it?
No. Ideally, it should assess a whole range of things. Skills, critical thinking, maybe even values. The kinds of capabilities we want graduates to have.
Which means traditional exams might not capture everything.
Often they don't capture those broader skills well. That's where this idea of learning-oriented assessment comes in, sometimes called assessment for learning or assessment as learning.
Okay, assessment for learning. What does that involve?
Well, a few key things. It should provide feed-forward guidance for the next piece of work, not just comments on the last one. The tasks should be challenging, requiring higher-order thinking. It needs to be integrated into the learning, not just tacked on at the end.
And involving students themselves?
Yes, through things like self-assessment and peer assessment. Seeing these not just as ways to grade, but as valuable learning activities in themselves.
Okay. Now, feedback. Students always say they want more feedback, but the handbook points out they don't always use it or find it helpful. Why the gap?
It's a really common problem. For feedback to work, it needs to be timely, not weeks after the work was done. It needs to be specific. And, crucially, it should explain why something was good, not just point out errors. Praising successful strategies helps students know what to repeat.
Positive reinforcement for what works.
Exactly. And practical things can help teachers manage it, like word processing comments or using banks of common feedback points.
Sure. But what about getting students to engage with formative assessment? The practice stuff that doesn't count towards the final grade. That can be tough.
It really can be. One key is making the link to the summative assessment really clear. Show them how doing this practice task will help them succeed in the graded one.
So making the relevance obvious.
Yes, and maybe offering small incentives, and ensuring it's genuinely formative, not secretly part of the grade. There's a case study mentioned where students self-assessed a draft, and a question about that self-assessment appeared in the final exam. Engagement went way up.
Ah, clever. The handbook also mentions marking in universities isn't always as straightforward as, say, A-level marking.
No, it can be more complex.
Yeah.
Especially with essays or projects, there's inevitably some subjectivity. And norm referencing can creep in markers comparing scripts to each other, rather than just the set criteria.
So how do departments try and manage that for consistency?
Things like detailed discussion of the marking criteria beforehand are vital. And pre-moderation, where markers assess a sample together to align their standards before marking the whole batch. That helps calibrate judgments.
Okay, so we've covered the big picture: students, learning theories, methods, assessment. The handbook then gets into how this all plays out differently across various subjects, doesn't it?
Yes. Part 3 delves into specific disciplines. It shows how these general principles get adapted or maybe even challenged in different fields.
Can you give us a flavor of that, say, sciences versus arts?
Sure. In experimental sciences, or engineering obviously, lab work is central for linking theory and practice. They might embed employability skills in labs, use online forums for technical questions. Engineering specifically wrestles with industry demands versus fundamental principles. Assessment often involves big projects, sometimes industry-linked.
And contrast that with, say, performing arts.
Very different feel. Often you have the tutor practitioner, someone who teaches but also works professionally in dance, drama, or music. Learning happens through performance, creating that community of practice. Peer assessment is common there. Theory and practice are deeply intertwined.
What about social sciences?
They might use things like real-time case studies, simulations like the Middle East negotiation example mentioned, to get students engaging with complex, messy issues. A specific challenge noted is teaching quantitative methods. The key seems to be making it relevant, applied, hands-on, and linked properly in the curriculum structure.
And professional degrees, law, medicine, nursing.
These are often heavily influenced by professional bodies and standards. Law might focus on embedding communication skills, using simulations. Business often emphasizes practitioner relevance, using part-time faculty from industry. Health fields like nursing and medicine rely heavily on simulation for safe practice. And there's a big focus on reflective practice, thinking critically about one's own actions.
The handbook mentions some specific examples there, right, with technology?
Yeah, like Newcastle Medicine, using iPads for students to track their competence development over time,
Mm.
collecting evidence and feedback longitudinally. Or Manchester Med School, using iPads to help students access resources when they're scattered on placements. It shows how tech can support learning in specific contexts.
So while the underlying principles, engagement, feedback, deep learning are consistent, the application is really tailored to the discipline's needs and practices.
Exactly. Each field finds its own ways to make those principles work for its specific content, skills, and professional demands.
This has been fascinating, really getting into the detail. If we were to synthesize, what are the main recurring themes from this handbook?
I think a few really stand out. Firstly, the absolute centrality of the student experience, viewing students as active partners, understanding their diverse backgrounds and life loads. Secondly, the need for varied, engaging teaching that goes beyond just transmitting information.
Right, and the role of assessment.
Crucial. Seeing assessment and feedback not just as measurement, but as integral parts of the learning process itself, assessment for learning. And finally, the evolving role of the teacher. Less sage on the stage, more facilitator, designer of learning, guide.
And there was that quite striking finding, drawing on Graham Gibbs' work, wasn't there, about what really impacts student learning gains.
Yes, that's a powerful point. The handbook argues that things often assumed to be key drivers, like university funding levels, research rankings, how selective the admissions are actually seem to have less impact on learning gains
Let's impact that.
than what actually happens in the educational process. The quality of the teaching, the learning activities, the assessment, and feedback strategies, that's where the real difference is made.
So it really boils down to the process, the interactions, the pedagogy, more than the prestige or resources of the place itself.
That seems to be the strong message. It's what you do with students day to day, in the classroom, online, in feedback.
Yeah.
That's the primary lever for improving learning, not just where they are studying.
That's a really important takeaway. It puts the focus squarely on the quality of teaching and learning interactions.
It does. It suggests that's where effort and resources can potentially have the biggest payoff for student success.
Well, that gives us a lot to think about, whether we're involved in teaching, learning, or just interested in how universities work. Understanding these principles gives a valuable perspective.
Definitely shifts the focus to the core human elements of education.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. Thanks so much for unpacking the handbook with us.
My pleasure. It's certainly a rich and complex area.
So, as a final thought for you, our listener, based on everything we've discussed, if the quality of the process matters more than the place, how might you approach your own learning, or maybe how you teach or guide others differently tomorrow? How could you put more focus on the what you do rather than just the where you are?
A great question to ponder, focusing on the practice itself.
Indeed. We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Thanks for listening.